All right, we live. Damonni.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
How you doing, sir?
I'm good, bro. I'm doing well, man.
It's happy to have you in the studio today.
I'm blessed and happy to be here with you, man.
And
for
you
sure.
know, we just gonna give you the floor. I know you got a story that you want to talk about.
Sure, man. It's okay. Yeah, let me get into my story, man, a little bit. So my name is Damonni Farley, man. I was born and raised right here in Schenectady, New York. People know me right now. I serve on Schenectady City Council. Before that, I was doing a lot of community work. And before that, I just, I grew up like, any normal kid, Schenectady. But it really was the things that made me, I guess what I want to talk about is what drove me into doing the community work, which then led into, the political arena. So I guess the best way to start is from the beginning. So me, myself, man, I'm somebody, I hit the parent lottery. I say that all the time, man. And my father, rest his soul, my mother's still here, but man, I hit the parent lottery, man. And what I mean by that, when I say that is, growing up, I had my mother and my father in the household. A lot of my friends, I can't think of any of my friends actually growing up who had that. And my father being there, man, because I was a bit of a knucklehead, man. I was a line stepper, line crosser my whole life, you know what I'm saying? So, having my father there and my mother there to help guide me through some things really changed, I think, the trajectory of what my life could have been. And I think about a lot of my friends who didn't have that and, some of the situations that they ended up in, because they didn't have those protective factors that I did. So my father, man, he was a Vietnam veteran. Him going to Vietnam and risking his life, he was, when he was in high school, he was actually voted the most friendly guy in high school. And for him to go over to Vietnam War, and he was like, ended up leading his platoon and things of that nature. So when he came back, I remember him and my uncle, man, they would talk about stories about them going over there, man, and risking their life for the country and coming back and watching, people that served with them being spit on and treated less than, especially for men of color, and that I think was my first kind of like taste of like racism and injustice. And I remember even at a young age how, it kind of made me feel, kind of rageful, it's like, that's not right, and how could people do that, like the shattering of your innocence, if you will. My mother is an extraordinary woman, grew up, dirt poor, and I had 7 siblings, and just overcame. She was sick when she was young, overcame a lot of things in her life. And I think it was the shared lived experience of the struggle that both of them, went through coming up. So when they met each other, they understood each other, they saw each other. And, for me and my sister, man, as a result of that, man, we had a really dope childhood, man, but was really surrounded with love and community building and the importance of having not just accountability for myself, but for my brother, for my neighbor, for us. So, and now that I think back, that was instilled in me in so many different ways, man. But at the time I didn't know, I didn't recognize, the seeds that they were planting. But now often, I'm faced with a challenge or something that, I'm trying to deal with, in my position as a councilman or whatever. And I go back, man, to those lessons and I can kind of go back to the things that they were telling me growing up. I'm like, oh, this is applicable in this situation, man. So yeah, so that's how that happened, man. I'm very, very fortunate in that way. But I remember like a couple key things that happened growing up that I think really set my trajectory. My mother worked for GE here in Schenectady, and she worked in a like admin assistant type of role, like a secretary type of role. And I remember when she got the job, we were at, well, not when she got the job, but when she announced to the family, we were at my grandmother's house, everyone's together. It might even have been around Thanksgiving time, and everyone's eating, and she was so proud to talk about this job that she got at GE. And I see like my aunts and my uncles and there was like pride in the room, like, oh, GE, that's a big company, that's great, that you got in there. And what that meant for them was, upward mobility. We went and bought a house, you know what I'm saying? A small house here in Woodlawn, and my mother's still there to this day. But I remember like things changing, right? And for the better And I can't exactly describe what it was. Like, I don't remember everything, but I remember the feeling of pride that she had. And I remember I was, kind of fast forward a couple years later, I was in 6th grade. And I came home one day, walked home, I walked in the house, I saw my mother there. Now my mother, we were latchkey kids, me and my sister, so the fact that she was there was like surprising. And I'm like, oh, Ma, what are you doing? And she had like this kind of long, like, look on her face, a sad look on her face. And I looked, and I can still remember this part vividly, man. It was like a clear plastic bag with a bunch of papers in it, and there was this blue clock, blue and gold clock that, like, that you would sit on the desk, and it said her name on it. And I'm like, Mom, what are you doing here? She didn't answer me. And then my father walked out from the back, and I'm like, what's going on? And I remember, her just saying it, man. And I remember that pain that she had in her voice. She said, I got fired. And it wasn't just the fact that she got fired, it was the pain I heard in her voice when she said it. And I was filled with rage, like, how could they do that? What happened? And, come to find out, my mother in her position, she was working with someone, she found some misappropriated funds, or I'd say, and she was very proud to bring that to her supervisor. She was like, hey, look, I found these, this is why, I'm paraphrasing here, whatever, this spreadsheet is off, whatever, and look, and there's some money missing here. And she thought that she discovered something good. And what ended up happening is that she found something she wasn't supposed to find. So instead of her, getting, accolades or a promotion or something for what she did, they ended up terminating her, man. And that was a pivotal moment for me again. I'm like, wow, as a kid, you think you do good work, good things happen. And not to say that that's not true, but there's also times that when you're doing something, you're doing it with integrity, you can face some challenges. And I remember after that, man, times got really hard for the family, and things took a turn. And that's, again, one of those moments where I'm like, man, like, it planted a seed in me of like, I want to fight for people like my mother, people who don't have like the social, political capital, people who don't have a lot of money, and people who don't have a lot of those political connections, you know what I'm saying? And so I remember, that was another pivotal moment. So that's part of my why. I went on from there to work, and I worked for a residential center, a group home, working with young people. And I remember we had this one young man that we actually had a new program that was based out of the Boys and Girls Club. And this program was for kids who would be normally in a residential treatment center, like kids that'll be locked up or whatever. But what ended up happening for this program, it was a new design for kids who could be locked up, but who would have been locked up, but instead of them going to be, incarcerated, they were able to stay home. But during the day, they would come to the Boys and Girls Club, and we would work with them, on pro-social activities, work with them with their schoolwork, a great program. But I remember this one kid, man, and this kid, he used to eat a lot of sunflower seeds, man, and he used to always throw his garbage all the time. Like, we'd be in the van, always have to tell him, yo, man, pick up your garbage, or we'll be in the game room, we'll have you, and we always tell him, yo, man, pick up your garbage. So we used to have to go around and pick kids up every day in order to bring them into program. And one day, we were picking up a kid from Rotterdam. This was a county program, not a city program, so this kid lived in Rotterdam, in a pretty affluent neighborhood. So we park the van, we get out, we go knock on the door to pick the kid up. He comes out. So the kids would jump out the car sometimes, like shoot hoops or whatever, as we got everybody loaded up. So the same young man, he threw his garbage on the floor, right? So I seen him do that, and I went to go say something to him, but before I could even say something to him, he reached down and picked it up. That doesn't sound like a big deal, but it's a big deal when you know that you've been working with this young person for over a year, and this is just something we always had to remind him. So I was curious, so me and my partner who I was working with that day, we all got in the van, and I was like, yo, why'd you pick that garbage up? And he looked at us with a straight face and said, because this doesn't look like the type of neighborhood you could throw garbage in. And I was like, wow. Like, you live in the neighborhood that that the club is in, that where our office is at, and every day, man, you eat sunflower seeds and just throw your trash, whatever, all over the place. You live there, But the minute I take you out of there and bring you someplace else, immediately that triggers you to know that, nah, this doesn't look like the type of place. So that type of behavior didn't look like it was acceptable in that place. And I'm like, damn, why don't you have that same feeling in a place where you live? And what type of, messages are we sending about our neighborhood that makes our young people think that they don't have any onus there and there is no level of accountability and they don't have to keep it clean, and that's where you live. And you go into this other kid's neighborhood that you probably might not ever be there again, but as soon as you did that, you picked it up and we didn't have to, tell you, remind you. And it was just like, man, like, what type of messages are we sending to our young people in the neighborhood? And that was something that like really made me want to start to work with young people in a way about building pride for who you are, what you are, where you live. Those are the, I remember that was kind of a pivotal moment for me in my journey working with youth. Yeah, so the best way I can explain things is kind of in that story format, because I can always remember like that moment, that young man picking up the garbage. Like those things are like, they stick out in my head. And that's just the kind of the way my brain works. And when I see things, man, and they don't necessarily add up, and like I said, even since I was a kid, I was the type of kid that asks a lot of questions. So why is always, my equation, I always tell young people, why equals work. In other words, if you want to know why, you're going to have to work to get to the truth. And so that's kind of happened with my, how I ended up in politics. But in order to talk about that, I guess I got to go back a little bit again and talk about my father. Because my father, man, again, like I told you, he was a Vietnam veteran. And growing up in Schenectady, now, we have like, this opioid epidemic that's sweeping the nation, man. And I remember in conversations with my father, about Vietnam and how, people that he grew up with and served with, got addicted to opioids. And when they came home, how that kind of traveled with them, man. So those conversations with him kind of turned into a broader conversation about systems. And just stay with me for a minute, if you can follow me here. Like, the conversation turned into really a talk I'd given around, and it was called how systemic racism killed my white friends. And that kind of sounds, kind of counterintuitive when you hear it, like how systemic racism killed your white friends. And in order to answer that question, we got to go back to that Vietnam time. So if you think back, as Vietnam War is ending, you have a lot of black and brown soldiers who, while they were in country in Vietnam, before they were introduced to these opioids, man. And when they came back, to the States, they brought that trauma, they brought their addictions, they brought all of the things back with them to the neighborhood, man. So when you have, addiction, all the social ills that go with that addiction, are present as well. But, my father, thank God, he, didn't fall to that, but he could have, very much could have. And a lot of, other my relatives did, and people that were close to me did. But the thing was, society looked at them as junkies, fiends, talked about them in ways, that was dehumanizing. So what that did, that allowed us not to give a shit, man. You know what I'm saying? It allowed us to like just say, they're making bad choices, they're gonna have to figure it out. So now you fast forward, 50 years later, and you have some of my white friends that I went to school with and, were at camps with and all sorts of stuff. And even, in affluent neighborhoods, they're dying of overdoses and really falling victim to this opioid crisis as well. And the reason why I say systemic racism killed my white friends, because if you think about it, the fact that we didn't recognize those black and brown people as human beings, and now we have this epidemic, which was an epidemic then, but now 50 years later, because we didn't recognize them as being human beings, we missed out on 50 years of research, of medication, of service delivery models, that if we would have recognized the humanity in them then, a lot of my black and my white friends that are unfortunately fell victim and succumb to their addictions, will still be here, man. And, I can think of people in particular, and I'm just like, that's the thing why I think in systems. That's why, I want to work in around building community and being a city councilor because we have a lot of influence of how the systems operate. And that's just one example of like, if you center people and the decisions you make, if we centered people then, 50 years now, man, we could have had this thing, already put together, here's this magical medical intervention that, could have wiped it out. But because we didn't see those black and brown people as people, we just saw them as junkies and fiends and what have you. And that level of dehumanizing them, not only did it impact them, and a lot of them suffered tragic deaths and long-term incarcerations and things of that nature. Man, if we'd have just recognized the humanity then, we wouldn't be dealing with this epidemic now. So that was, something that that's always in the forefront of my mind of like centering people, man, and making sure whatever we do, that we're doing it with people in mind.
Walk me through the process of running for city council. When did you realize that you wanted to go after that seat, and how hard was it? If it was, like,
man,
what was the process?
So what I tell people, man, getting involved in politics is not as bad as people make it seem. It's worse. Like, that's a fact, man. Like, I remember, so it was 2017 was the first time I ran for office. And going back to some of my experiences, I know, I would say I believe, but I'm gonna say I know that our communities look the way they look and function the way they function. That's intentional, there's no coincidence there. So like I said, I'm working with youth, and I'm working with youth from marginalized communities. I'm working with a lot of youth in the hood, right? And I'm looking at like our city budgets and things that were, money that was coming in, and the hood. What people don't recognize is that the hood is the richest city neighborhood in the city. And people don't recognize that, and they don't understand what I mean when I say that. And what I mean is like, there's so much funding, grants and aid that comes into a city like Schenectady. A lot of that is due to the conditions of poverty that people are living in. So you think about it, man, you got all of this money coming in because of people that are living in a certain condition, and those same people that are living in a certain condition, they got the least say of what happens with the money. So, when I started like recognizing that, man, that's when I'm like, wait a minute, man, like, nah, this isn't okay. And I know it doesn't have to be like that. Schenectady is like one of those places, man, where it's unique in that it's big enough to where you can make some pretty impactful changes, but it's also small enough to where, there's that sense of community that you can really galvanize people and start to like really build momentum around a certain movement. So when I first ran, the politics, I'll say, like when you run for city council, you have to get a certain amount of signatures of people to say, hey, okay, that just for you to run. That's not to say they vote for you, but that's for you to run. And, I did that. I went through that process, and again, I didn't have the big campaign budget. I didn't know all the people that are, all the players in the game. But my message was real. I'm from Schenectady, man. People know me. They know who I am. They know who I've been. So, I got skeletons. I just don't got a closet. Like, there's no chance of me trying to reinvent myself. But that was like liberating in a way. So people know when I show up authentically. And that's a threat to the powers that be, or the perceived powers that be, because the power is really in the people, and it always is. So my first run, they disqualified me on some technicalities, so I didn't make it. And I know that they thought they saw the last of me, but then I came back again years later, a little more wiser to some of the tricks that they were going to play. They tried again, but was unsuccessful. So the party actually didn't want to nominate me. So I launched what's just called the primary, meaning that the good old boys don't get to just pick this person. They could say, we want this person. And I'm saying, okay, well, then we got to take it to the people to a vote. and the people have the ultimate say, and then, you know, the people chose me, and that's why I'm here, man. And I never forget that.
You know, what was that moment when you won that seat?
Yeah, man. So like, personally, you know, I was I was a little scared, man. It's one of those things that, like, you know, I'm like, yo, like, you know, what did I get myself into? You know, be careful what you ask for, and be careful what you work for. Honestly, I did have a little a level of uncertainty, because I'm like, you know, running for the seat, you get to see how nasty this game is, man. And it's like, you know, and now I'm here. You know, you got to stand on business. But for me personally, so I was definitely honored. But I was a little nervous, because I know the expectation that people have of me. You know what I'm saying? So, and you know, it ain't the easy road to walk, but it was very fulfilling, man. I'm very honored, and I was excited about it, man. You know, my family was proud, because, you know, they were part of, you know, my first time running, obviously, and they saw the dirty political tricks. And they, you know, was just basically like, you know, you didn't give up, and you here, and this is what happens. So it was a full circle moment, man. I think one of my proudest moments was when I was sworn in. Actually, my father was sick in the hospital, man. So, you know, for me being sworn in, and I didn't, you know, expect him to be there. And man, sure got wheeled into that wheelchair, man. He got out the hospital, sick bed, to be there, man. And that's one of my proudest moments, you know, because I know that you know, that was a full circle moment for me. Like, yeah, Pops, you know, I'm here, and I know I stand on the shoulders of giants such as yourself, man. So I know the mission ahead of me, man.
What gave you the courage to even take on the good old boys and take on that challenge?
Yeah, man. I mean, we still taking them on, man. But you know, like I said, man, I was always, you know, a bit of a risk taker when I was young. You know, like it's like, you know, like. You know, you couldn't just tell me something. You can't tell me fire was hot, I had to touch it. You know what I mean? I remember growing up, my mother, so we used to play, we were dumb kids, man. We used to play this game called chicken on our bikes, right? And the chicken game meant like, you be on your bike, I'll be on mine, and we'll be riding towards each other, and the first person to turn off loses. And, you know, I never lost that game. It wasn't because I was brave, you know, the irony of it was really because I was afraid. But me, the fear of letting people know that I was afraid was greater and stronger than me, you know, actually, you know, potentially crashing out on my bike. So that has always been kind of my, you know, my mother would say when I was young, boy, you'll cut your nose and spite your face sometimes, you know, I'm Mr. You got to show me. So, you know, that. I don't know that it was really necessarily courage as it much was like, you know, almost like defiance and resistance. Like, they can't tell me I can't do that. Like, you know, especially when you know you got a heart for the people. You know, I didn't get elected, then start doing community work. Community work isn't something I do, it's who I am. You know, I get a lot from it, man. And, you know, people talk about, oh, you know, like being selfless, and I'm gonna be real with you, man. It's not selfless for me. I get a lot from it. I get, you know, it's a very gratifying feeling, you know, to be able to help people, man. So that's just what I wanted to do.
You got a powerful story, and you know, with this platform, don't hide the plug. This series is called "The Cosign is Dead," and you know, the cosign is dead is a phrase I came up with. It's like, you know, ain't nobody really coming to save us. You know what I mean? It's like we really got to get out there and work together and kind of build our own bridge.
I agree with you, but the thing we gotta, those walls, man, it's a house of cards, bro. It's a perception, man. You know, I remember I saw this graphic on the internet, man, where they had like the guy was telling a story about elephants in the circus. He said, if you ever go to the circus, you know, they got this big elephant, man, and he's tied to this little tiny peg in the ground, right? And he's like, you know, why doesn't the elephant just move and rip that peg out the ground? But it's learned behavior, because when that elephant's a little baby elephant, it's not strong enough to move that peg that they put in the ground. So even as it grows and it becomes strong, it doesn't recognize its own strength. It's always conditioned to think that little peg can hold us. And those little pegs, man, those walls you talk about, those are little pegs, man. We are far more powerful than what we would even like to admit. Because if we admit how powerful we are, then we have to accept responsibility for our condition, bro. And I'm gonna tell you, man, I know people from so many different walks of life, man. I was so blessed to have so many mentors, you know, from, you know, businessmen, you know, dudes in the street, guys in the barbershop, people that they just wasn't having that mediocrity for me. You know what I'm saying? They wasn't accepting that level of like, you know, somebody got to come rescue us mindset. Like, absolutely not, man. We stand on the shoulders of giants, people who, you know, even like the work that I do that I'm so proud of, man, people have done so much more with less before me. How dare us act like we can't control our own narrative? You know what I'm saying? So nah, that resonates with me, and you say that, bro. We have to recognize that we are more powerful than we give our credit. And all those barriers, man, you know, they look like mountains, but they molehills, bro. We could step right over them, man. Especially if we do it collaboratively, we work together, for sure.
You know, that's a fact. You know, all that stuff you accomplished, man, how you make you feel today, though?
So, you know, I feel good. I feel good with some of the things that, you know, that we accomplished, you know, and I say we because a lot of times, you know, I might be the one writing the legislation or the vote, but there's teams that, like, you know, I got people who are not even necessarily involved in politics that are part of my research team, people that will, you know, reach out to me and help me come up with like innovative ways to try to, you know, change the landscape for us. And, you know, so sincerely and genuinely, you know, nothing I do, I could do by myself. So like, but you know, it feels good, but I know that, man, we got a lot of work to do, especially, you know, with things are changing in the nation right now, being so polarized, man. It's like, you know, now it's time to really, you know, step it up a notch.
You know, living in the capital region, right? Small businesses, entrepreneurs, creatives, people that's adding to the community. What advice would you give some of these people to get some of these grants that they don't even know about and how to go about getting them?
Yeah, man, that's a great question. So first thing I would do if I was people is that you have to is, you know, come together, right? Even if I want to know, if I want to know about available grants, a good way to do it is to talk to other people who are in a business, right? And start to build your network in your business community. And then when you ask a question, don't just ask the question as a person. So in other words, Damonni, small business owner, I don't want to just know what grants are available, but there's a coalition of me, you, him, her, and we all want to know what type of grants are out there, what things are available, and how do we as a collective access those grants? Because the name of the game has been for so long, you got to know the secret handshake or something like that. And people are quick to play gatekeepers or shut the door on an individual. But man, when we come together and there's, you know, a few of us saying, you know, that raised the stakes. So, you know, definitely that's one way. I guess that's really more of the approach I would take. But really the thing that needs to happen is get connected with your city council people, get connected with the community loan fund, your business districts, chamber of commerce. Like, these are all things that exist to help the business community. And a lot of times people won't know, but that's intentional too. We're being real, man. Like, you know, that information is out there, but it's not always accessible. So we don't know, but you're gonna have to be somebody who is a line stepper. You're gonna have to be somebody who's resilient, and you're gonna have to try to, you know, don't take no for an answer. In other words, if I'm not eligible for this grant, well, what prevents me from being eligible for the grant? Show me why I'm not eligible, and what changes do I need to make to be eligible? You know, it's like you got to really, you know, these things are intentionally kind of the gatekeeping is real, and there's some intentionality around that. So you just got to push past that, man. And if you're Schenectady, please reach out to me, get with me. You know, I definitely don't have all the answers, but I'm always willing to ask the hard questions and hold people accountable, man.
And you know, being that you somebody that sit in these rooms, you know, what advice would you give somebody that's watching that think just because they come from the ghetto or they might not talk the same language, they might feel like they don't belong, you know?
Yo, I remember, my first, well, I think it was my second or third meeting. We were talking about funding and things coming into the city. And I was joking with a colleague. I said, man, I'm going back to the hood where it's safe, because the gangsters is down here, man. Like, these people, like, they're sitting there smiling in your face and, yeah, we support your cause. And as soon as it's time to write a check, they're like, mm-mm. You know what I'm saying? So like, so I remember making that joke, man. But I would say this, man, like, you know, life adversities that you face and have overcome and or are currently overcoming are preparing you for this. You know what I mean? That's not, you don't need to have an invitation to the table. It's your table. It's yours. It's already here for you. So what you got to do is just go take your seat. And if you don't allow anyone, you don't have to trade pieces of yourself to access the things that are here, because they're here for you already, man. So please, don't allow any of those, misconceptions of what it means to be a politician stop you from getting involved in any way that you see fit, man. You just do it.